Hello and welcome back to part 2 of how to make these Super Mario Odyssey cupcakes. I'll show you how to make the final 6 of these. This is also a collaboration with the brilliant work from Inspire Happenings. Please go over and check out the channel. Missy is a brilliant cake maker, incredibly creative, and she comes up with some excellent bakes that you can do at home. So we'll start off by going straight onto Cappy. I won't show you how to make the blue background, that's in part 1 and is pretty straightforward, so if you want to see how you do that, please just check out part 1. But for Cappy, it's just a case of getting a piece of red fondant and moulding it into the top half of the cap, and then for the actual brim of the cap I just eyeballed that part, rolled out a piece of thinner fondant and made that stand proud so that it looked a bit more 3D, so just keep fiddling until that looks about right. And once you're happy with that, you can place it onto your light blue fondant topper with a little bit of edible glue or water, and that should stick for you. And each of these elements I let dry slightly before moving them so that there wasn't big finger marks in them. And then it was a case of cutting out the eyes on Cappy from the template I'd drawn, and making little bits of fondant to fit the shape, and using that template again to make sure I place them in the right position. And water was used to stick these ones on too. And then I've done exactly the same with the whites of Cappy's eyes. And then the same with the little red bits and the black pupils as well in the middle. So pretty straightforward, a little fiddly as it's all so tiny, but well worth it. Final little pupil. And I found that using the back of a paintbrush was really helpful, rather than your fingertips, as you could be a little more directional. And then a tiny little bit of white edible food gel for the highlight in his eye. And that's that one finished. Okay, so the next one is the Goomba, and I just had some dark brown and some light brown and made 3 shades for the Goomba. The middle part of his body, which you see, or I guess it would be the top part, was the medium shade of brown, and I just moulded that to the shape of the template that I'd drawn. And this is the bottom part of his body, which was the lighter brown. And then the bottom part were his little feet. So gently transferring him across to his top part. And then the little soles of his shoes were the same colour as his body. And all these little details, they really help to make the top of something special, really. Just shows that extra bit of care. And then using a fondant tool, I indented his downward smile, but you could use a cocktail stick or a butter knife, and then I just impressioned where his frowny eyebrows were going to go, and then rolled out the teeniest pieces of black fondant worms and placed his little scowly eyebrows on there too. And then adding the white part of his eyes and cutting them down to shape whilst they were on. And then his little, I think they're his bottom teeth that sort of stick up. Put them on there. And that X-Acto knife was a godsend for getting in all these little fiddly bits. And then his little pupils. And then finishing off with, he's got 2 light spots in his eyes, so one smaller and then one bigger underneath. And that is what I'm using there. It was just like a pound shop or a dollar store, whatever you call it. It was like for nails, but as long as you've cleaned them, they'll never be used on my nails. You can use them as fondant tools. So next up was the walnut mushroom, and I'm just using the drawing that I'd made as a template for the top part of his, I guess it's his hat you would call it, I'm not sure. And then indenting slightly where his little face will go, and then using this ivory colour for his face. And then for the little dots on his green hat part, I used the back of a piping tip. So you don't need to go out and buy loads of cutting tools for that, just use what you've got handy that'll work. And stuck those on with, you can use water or edible food gel, whatever you've got. Oh, sorry, edible food glue. And then transferring him over to his topper. And then using an edible black pen for his eyes. And then again with the light spot. Just finishes that off nicely. And there he is. And the next topper is the super simple one, which is the star. So this is a case of just cutting out the template and cutting around the star with your X-Acto knife or sharp knife, whatever you're using. If you can leave the fondant for about 15 minutes to dry, that'll make it much easier to cut and keep straight edges, so I'd recommend doing that if you can. If you can't, perhaps just pop them in the fridge for 5 minutes and that'll help just a little, and then leave them to dry if you're going to use a pen to put his eyes on, an edible pen, because otherwise you will push into the fondant. So just finishing his eyes off here, and then he's transferred onto his topper with a little highlight in his eye as well. So that's a nice simple one. The next one up is one of my favourites, Bullet Bill. And for this I rolled out some black fondant and I placed some cling film over the top to create, when you push down on the fondant, it will create nice smoother edges, sort of a slightly rounded. And then using a piping tip the round of his pointy nose as well. So all those little tips just help to finish it off nicely and add more to the detail, I think. And then finishing off his back parts, his little black indents there. And I found that using that tiny palette knife to cut rather than a sharp knife helped with the smoothness of the edges as well. So if you've got one of them, I'd definitely use that, as it's perfectly straight too. And then they're all joined together with a little bit of water. And now time for his tiny little arm. So there's a little grey dot to show where it joins, and then a little white piece of fondant to create his little arm and his little fist as he's shooting through the air, and to create his little finger and thumb marks, just the back of the X-Acto knife pushed in and then placed on with a bit of water. And then for his eye, tiny little circle cut out and cut in half as he's looking pretty mean, and a little bit of water to place that on as well. And then finishing off with the teeniest bit of black fondant for the pupil of his eye. And then he can be transferred onto his background as well. And these fondant toppers can be made in advance, as long as you store them well, and then place on the cakes once you've cooked them. I wouldn't put them in an airtight container for too long, as you will make them go a bit sticky and soft. So next up is Boo, and using a piece of white fondant I created his tail and then stuck on his little ghosty arms. And then I eyeballed this part, his mouth. I didn't have time to let the fondant go sort of harder in this part, so this was a bit more tricky to do, and you can see there was a bit of drag there when I cut that, and that's the difference between being able to rest it and not. I mean, you can do it, it's just a lot harder really. And then sticking his inside of his mouth on with a bit of water, and I shaded that with some black edible dust. And then once you're happy with that, you can make your tongue. He's got a massive tongue, all flopping around. So just add that to little Boo. And then his row of teeth, which were teeny tiny. So just cutting them out with the X-Acto knife and then sticking them on with a piece of water. And just rounding them off a bit, because when I looked at the picture, they weren't spikes, they were sort of rounded at the end. And then his row of teeth there. And then finally finishing off his face with an edible pen, creating his frowny brow and his eyes. And that's King, or Boo. No crown for this one, so he's just Boo. This one is complete. And that was the last of the cupcake toppers. So I gave them all a good steam just to get any cornflour marks off. And then cupcakes I'd made already with a caramel frosting this time. Give them a swirl inside to out with an open star tip, and then place on your toppers. I'll leave links below for the recipes for cupcakes and buttercream as well, but I figured this video was long enough already that I wouldn't show you how to make them, as I've already got some videos on that. And then the final three. Little Boo, Goomba, and Walnut Mushroom. And that's the lot. So if you like these, please check out part 1. Also, do go and have a look at Inspire Happenings. The links are below for her video, and that's of this brilliant giant Cappy cake. She's so good, and I have learnt a lot from her channel as well, so I hope you do too, and go and subscribe and like her videos because she is brilliant. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.